Welcome. I hope you are having a wonderful night, dear viewer. Tonight, I will be telling some terrifyingly scary stories. Make sure to leave your feedback on the comments so I can make this the best experience for you. And if you have any stories you would like me to tell, you can send them through the link in the description. Let's begin. I'm a nurse at a palliative care unit in an old hospital. If you're a nurse at one of these units like me or know a nurse, please read until the end. I could use your help. Throughout my years working at this hospital, I've seen a lot, especially being in a palliative care unit, where you see a lot of things other people wish they wouldn't. For some of us, at some point, we just have to accept things as they are. The unit I work in has 9 beds in 9 different bedrooms, all spread along a long corridor. At the start of the corridor is the lift, and coming out of it, you'd find the cleaning room on your right, where we keep all the cleaning equipment and products, and the nurse's room on your left, along with the entrance through the stairs. Because of the building and patient safety, and so we can access the other floors easily if in need, the administration forbade us from locking the staircase doors. This isn't ideal because some of our patients, in their delusions, can go across our room's door unnoticed and will be a danger to themselves. So we always keep the doors closed by tying a bedsheet around the door handles to keep them together. This is important, so you know why What Comes Next started out so strange. The nurse's room is where we'll spend most of the night shifts doing all kinds of activities, including resting and actually sleeping. Usually, late at night, my routine would include checking on all our patients, checking on all the doors and windows to make sure they are all locked properly, checking on the doors to the stairs, and then spending most of the night checking patient files. This night in particular, I had finished with my rounds and was checking on all the cameras. When my nursing auxiliary came into the nurse's room, she asked me if anything else was needed, or if she was okay to sleep for a while. I told her she was fine to go to sleep, so she took her shoes off, laid down with her back to the room, and me facing the wall, and went to sleep. I was reading a new patient's file who was coming into our unit soon, to know what to expect and how to behave around him, when I started hearing footsteps walking up and down the unit's corridor. At first, I ignored them, thinking I was just tired, and that my ears were playing tricks on me. It wouldn't be the first time, as they persisted, though I started wondering what was going on. I took another look at the cameras, but each and every one of the bedroom and corridor feeds seemed completely normal. The steps, though, kept coming all the way to the nurse's room, stopping about 2 steps away from showing at my door, then turning around and walking back all the way to the opposite end of the corridor. I waited to see if anything changed, but when it didn't, I stood up to go check. That's when one of our patients, the one in room number 7, started calling us frantically. My auxiliary nurse was still asleep, so I walked carefully out of the room, peeked out of the room, and looked around. There was nothing there, and the footsteps had stopped, so I rushed to the patient's room. When I got there, he was shouting frantically, huddling against the bed's headboard with what seemed like renewed energy, shouting at me to tell the man in the top hat sitting on the chair in the room to go away and leave him be. Usually, with patients like these in this state of stress, we just go along with their delusions to calm them down. If there are nurses watching, which I hope there are, you'll know what I mean. In this case, with him screaming in the room, I turned towards the chair and started talking to this imaginary man in a top hat, telling him he needed to go, that the visiting hours were done, and that he needed to leave right now or we'd have to call security. After this, the patient calmed down, thanked me effusively for sending the man away, and laid back down to rest. I went back to the nurse's room and started studying the new patient. As I walked back in, my heart stopped. All I felt was panic gripping my heart inside me. As I stood there, not knowing what to do and looking at the surveillance cameras, there was a big shadow standing right in the middle of the frame of the camera, recording the end of the corridor, right in front of the bedroom I had just been in. I took one step back and leaned backward to check if I could see anything there, and there was nothing. I gave the cameras another quick glance, and the shadow was still there, standing terrifyingly still in front of this patient's bedroom door. This time, though, when I turned to look directly at the corridor again, this thing was there. For a moment, it felt like everything froze in place, and I just stood there, looking at it like a fool. Then, slowly, it turned towards me, a pair of strange, dark red eyes showing. It stood like that for a bit, screeched at me, and flew into the patient's bedroom, slamming the door behind it. My auxiliary nurse jumped awake at the slam of the door and started frantically asking me what was going on. I was out of breath by now. I told her what I had just seen and what had just happened, and she couldn't believe me. I asked her to come with me to the patient's bedroom, and she agreed, starting to become curious. We walked slowly through the corridor, passing every door carefully. I was afraid that anything would come flying at us. When we got to the bedroom, this thing flew into. I pushed the door open without going in to check for any kind of danger, and immediately felt a breath of freezing air hit me in the face. The air conditioning was on in every room and set to 23 degrees, so this was not normal. Nothing came flying at us, like I was afraid would happen, but there, right by the patient's bed, there was this shadow. I could tell it was a man, tall and strong, with a top hat over his head. I asked my auxiliary nurse if she could see him, not expecting a no. However, that's what I got. She couldn't see anything standing there, and definitely not as clearly as I could. Slowly, the shadow turned toward me again. This time, it didn't scream. This time, it slowly dissipated. Immediately, I calmed down. Not only could I not see it anymore, I also couldn't feel it. This sense of calm came over me, and the patient seemed okay. So we left the room and went back to the nurse's room. My colleague went back to sleep, but I didn't rest until I checked the rest of the unit to make sure everyone was safe. After that, I couldn't help but stare at the cameras every minute for the rest of the night. Eventually, our shift was over, and would become the shift with the most intense experience I ever had. The next day, when night came and I did all my rounds, I went inside room 7 to check on the patient. When I came closer to him, I realized he had passed away. This was my first experience with the shadow man in the top hat, but it wasn't the last, and it's still ongoing. I'm the only one who can see him around the unit, which freaks everyone out. Every single time I see him, it's under the same circumstances. I walk into a patient's room, and there's his shadow at the feet of their bed. I wait for a little while until he turns to me and dissipates. 1 or 2 days later, the patient passes away. This is a real story, and it's something I have to live with almost every day now. I'm not sure if this thing is killing people or announcing their deaths. But if you are a nurse in a similar unit or know someone who is, please share this with them and comment on what you know about it. I need to know what this is, how to deal with it, and if anyone else has experienced the same as me, even if it's a different looking entity. I can keep you updated here if people are engaging and want to know more. Let me know if you want any updates, and I'll make sure to bring them. If you're dealing with something like this yourself, know that you're not the only one. Maybe this will help you feel less afraid. A long one, but a spooky one that just happened to us this summer. Me and my boyfriend stayed at a pub hotel in the early summer, back when we were long distance, and my boyfriend was still living in a different region. He would regularly come up to see me, and we'd stay in different hotels in my area of England because I lived with my family. In this pub in the room we were staying in, we had been having a little bit of an argument, but before it could escalate, I decided to go outside and sit in my car for 5 minutes. So I left the hotel and sat in my car, which was in the parking lot a little after 9 p.m. When I returned to the room about 5 minutes later, my boyfriend told me that we were in trouble with the manager for being noisy. He told me that after he returned to the room, the manager had knocked on our room door and told him off for making a noise, saying that he had received 2 complaints about the noise we had been making. Before we checked out the next morning, I was looking out of our room window and saw a young couple also leaving, and I wondered if it had been them who we'd annoyed and who had complained. We went out for breakfast, and things about the complaint didn't add up for me. For one thing, we weren't that loud and hadn't been arguing for even that long before I went out to my car. So how had two people managed to complain, and for that complaint to go straight to the manager all in the space of the 5 minutes it took me to walk to my car and back? I concluded to my boyfriend that the manager must have just heard us himself and made up that two different guests had complained. Fast forward to the afternoon of that day, when we checked out, and we unexpectedly needed to book another night at this pub or hotel, due to the trains all being on strike when my boyfriend was due to travel back home. While I was at work, my boyfriend went back to the pub and checked us in for another night. He apologized for us being noisy the night before to the woman who was checking him in again. The woman said she hadn't known about us making a noise, and my boyfriend told her that the manager had knocked on our door last night and told him off. The woman member of staff said that it was odd because the only staff they have on at night is the chef and the young male bartender, and neither of them go upstairs, and that their manager is a woman with blonde hair, not a man. The female member of staff said she doesn't know who this man is. None of the staff do, but other guests have also told her the same, that a man had knocked on their door complaining about the noise, implying that he was the manager. Well, the man my boyfriend had spoken to was in his 60s with geld, back salt and pepper hair, and he was really mean. My boyfriend recalled to me later that when he apologized, this man just glared at him and didn't make a move to leave, so my boyfriend just awkwardly shut the door on him. My boyfriend asked who else had stayed there, but was told that we and the other young couple I saw leaving were the only guests that previous night. This left us questioning who on earth the man was who knocked on our door, pretending to be the manager. So that night, we were feeling quite creeped out. We were in a different room that was just opposite the one we'd previously stayed in. Anyway, eventually we forgot about it and were having a bit of a laugh when a really hard knock on our room door rang out. My heart sank, and I was telling my boyfriend not to answer because it was the man again. He, of course, answered anyway. The door was about 2 or 3 feet from the bed we were on. He opened the door and there wasn't anybody there or in the corridor, which we were at the very end of. It was a long, straight, creaky corridor. Well, we were terrified by now. The next day, my boyfriend emailed the pub, explaining the situation and saying we were concerned a weird stranger was knocking on doors in their hotel. We gave them the exact times of both incidents and asked them to check their CCTV cameras, one of which was right next to both of the rooms we'd stayed in. The manager replied to his email with this. It's a screenshot of the email my boyfriend received from the pub, but since I cannot attach images, I have transcribed the email. It goes as follows. Dear Mr. John Doug, following your recent complaint about another guest knocking at your door late at night, we reviewed our SCCTV footage from 6/8/23 and 9/6/23 at the stated times these incidents took place. On June 23, at exactly 9:5 p.m., CCTV footage showed a man knocking and having a brief conversation with the guest in the room, after which the man turned left and walked down the corridor. However, he was not picked up on any CCTV footage, leaving the premises or walking further down the corridor. Following this, we have gone over the security points of the building and made sure all entrances are secured to prevent anything like this from happening again. On June 23, however, we did not pick up anything unusual happening on our cameras at the stated time of the incident. We hope these incidents didn't affect your stay at the pub, and we apologize profusely for any stress this may have caused. Just know that we have taken all measures to resolve this. Kind regards, Manager John Doe Pub. This email to us made us feel validated that we didn't imagine our experiences, especially to have them confirmed by the manager herself via CCTV. We did ask to see the CCEV ourselves, but our further emails were unfortunately ignored. This pub was taken over by a pub chain company, and they are very strict with their staff about being anti-ghost stories and only focusing on quality customer service, according to a former member of staff who I by chance managed to speak to. This member of staff told me some crazy things about the pub. I'll add more in a further comment if this gets read and engaged with by anyone. Thank you for reading this far. Another poster had asked for true ghost stories, which I posted about when I worked in trauma scene cleanup. I used to manage a crew, and our job was to go in after a homicide, unattended death, accidental death, or other case that caused a lot of damage due to some type of incident. Sometimes it was very minimal, and other times it was extremely graphic. Most of my stories are about how sad the scene was, or sometimes just how crazy it is that some people manage to get themselves killed. I did this work in the 1990s, up until shortly after 9/11. We were usually called in after the investigation was over, so the coroner had already removed the bodies. I never really saw the person, but I would see photos in the house and know which one it was. I never really tried to think about it beyond the task at hand. I kept my crew very respectful. I never allowed anyone to smoke while on scene, use bad language, or listen to music when we were inside, and we would almost whisper to each other. It was hard keeping workers in this kind of job. Some, after their first murder scene, left the job and never came back. I never came back. I never blamed anyone and would not allow a new person to just enter a scene, especially if they had never encountered the sights or the smells. We all wore PPE, or protective gear. It was disposable, as in some cases you wouldn't want to try to wash it away. Anyway, back to the story. One day, we get a call to dispatch an unalive call. For some reason, most of our call-outs always happen either late in the day or in the middle of the night. There must not have been much of an investigation into this dead body, as the scene was very fresh. We arrive at a lower middle-class house in a middle-class, working-age neighborhood. The neighborhood must have been built in the 1940s or 1950s based on the way the homes looked. My job when we arrive is to get the paperwork sorted before we enter the property. Normally, on most scenes, a public agency such as the fire department, sheriff's department, police, or family representatives have to sign off for us to enter the property and do what we need to do. It isn't uncommon for a family friend or even a neighbor to sign off as a representative due to either the entire household being lost or no one else being available. We just have to have someone with stated authority sign our paperwork. When we arrive on scene, there's an older, middle-aged woman seated in the garage. You can tell she's been crying, but I sit and talk with her. I usually ask questions like, in the affected room, is there anything of sentimental or monetary value that you would like us to remove and put somewhere safe? Or is there anything dangerous left in the room? Usually the PD removes that, but I still ask. I also ask if there are any soft materials like bedding, curtains, furniture, etc. that you would like us to try and salvage if affected. I have always been told that I am very good at talking to people in that kind of situation. So that is why shortly after I started working in the field, I was promoted to supervisor. This lady that I was talking to, well, she didn't seem distraught because of the death of her son, but she was frightened. She was visibly shaking and kept looking at the front door. My crew was still in our truck, suiting up. I had asked her if she would like to show us the affected area or if we could just enter. She snapped back and said I would never step foot inside that house again, which is understandable due to the fact that her son had just taken his life inside that house. I said, okay, if you can just tell me which room it is. And she said it's the first bedroom to the left, just as you enter the hallway. That is when I noticed that she wasn't looking at the front door, but at the first window to the left of the front door. I motioned and said, is that the bedroom window there? She said yes. She grabbed my hand and said something like, this is going to sound crazy, but there's something evil in that house. I just stood there, letting her talk. I did nod my head like I agreed with her. She said I would never go back to that house again. She said, you don't understand. Something real evil is inside that house. I told her that I understood. And if there was anyone she wanted us to call for her, she said that a friend who was going to be by shortly from another city that was like over an hour away from her was going to take her away from that house. My crew leader came up and we told her we were going to get started. We entered the house and it wasn't much of a bloodbath inside. There was a very small pool of blood in front of the bed and a larger pool of blood on the mattress. I also noticed what looked like vomit on the mattress. The thing that really stood out was that the wall was covered in writing, and the writing was in blood. The whole house seemed dark and heavy, as best I could describe it. It was messy. Not like a hoarder situation, but they obviously didn't keep it up well. As my crew was working on the scene, I went out to talk to the lady, and I wanted to make sure it was okay with her that we bag up the mattress and dispose of it. When I went outside, she was sitting there facing inside the garage, smoking a cigarette. I had asked her if she wanted to salvage the mattress or if we could just dispose of it. She said something like, "I wish we could just burn this whole place down." Then she started to tell me about the house. She said it started with her husband. She said that a few years ago, he took his own life inside the house in the master bedroom. About a year ago, her oldest son took his life inside the house. She said she woke up to find him hanging in his room. She said that house is evil. Evil spirits live inside it and attack you. I sat with her and just said, "I am so sorry to hear about all that you've gone through." She said I didn't blame them for leaving me. She went on to just say how the demons are attacking anyone who enters. The thing is, she didn't look crazy or talk crazy. She just looked very worn, tired, and mostly scared. Up to this point, I do have to admit that some scenes are just plain evil. You feel it. I can't describe it. But if you could ever feel evil, demons, or bad spirits, whatever you call them, I felt them many times. I felt it inside that house, mostly when I looked at the writing on the wall. The guy who killed himself had drank poison, slashed his throat, then took blood from his cut and wrote on the wall. Now, everyone with whom I've shared this story has asked me what was written on the wall. The truth is, I don't know. I couldn't make sense of it. I did make out some words like here, the little blue boy, and some others that I forgot, but it wasn't in another language. I guess that because he was bleeding out. He couldn't write it well. The message he left on the wall covered the entire wall. My workers bagged the mattress, cut out the carpet, and cut out the drywall. And they were done so quickly that I was even surprised. They wanted to get the hell out of there too. They hadn't heard what the older lady told me. As I told the lady that we were complete, she still sat there smoking a cigarette, shaking, and just waiting for her friend to arrive. I felt bad leaving her alone, but it wasn't my job or responsibility to sit and stay with her. My crew talked about how messed up that scene was. I think the writing had gotten to them. As we pulled away, I shared what the old lady said to me, and one of my crew members, who always wore a cross, said he felt like he wasn't welcomed in there, and he was the one pushing to get the heck out of there fast. I know this isn't a typical ghost story, as we didn't see a ghost, but do I think evil spirits drove all the male members of this family to kill themselves? I don't know. I don't think I want to ever find out.